Welcome back. Let's see. Here's a topic off the top of my head. I'm not sure where it came from. Not sure where any of them come from. Uh, Jesus, in one of his discourses, said something along the lines. He was a very radical teacher, very unorthodox. And he said, by the way, I've said all of you are gods. It's not exactly how it's phrased, but I think he might have said, all of ye are gods. And the things that I do, you'll do these things and greater things even still. And then a few sentences later, he says, be ye therefore perfect, as is your Father in heaven. That was literally a head scratcher. So I just scratched my head, which must have revealed something. But if an infinitely wise spiritual being says to those listening that you too are gods and you're worshiping me and giving me this brand of respect and oblation, and I'm telling you straight up that you're gods as well, and be ye therefore perfect. It's very, very challenging to reconcile. But the topic of this week is, if we acknowledge that one definition of, or one aspect of God would be that God is infinite. It seems to be a common way of defining God. If you box in God, if you define God, if you make God finite, God's not finite. So God can't be a person, can't be a mountain, can't be a cloud going by. Those could be aspects of God, but where I'm going with this is that there's one thing infinite God cannot be. It's a strange way of thinking, but follow me just a little bit, and perhaps there's great wisdom and truth in where this will go for all of us. And that is, if there's one thing that infinite God cannot be, that is, God cannot be finite. God can't be finite, except in you and in me and all of God's finite individualizations. In other words, infinite God has a remarkable, wacky, wonderful, astonishing, miraculous, hard to believe, profound ability to individualize him, her, or itself into an infinite number of versions of its own self. So that's you, that's me. And in our finiteness, there's a lot of forgetting that goes on. There's a lot of limitation that goes on. There's a lot of constriction and constraint that happens to us as finite beings. And yet, at the core of our being, there's this divine spark that is, in fact, infinite. So, paradoxically, going on at the same time is our infinite nature and our finite nature. Why does that happen? That is so far above my pay grade. That is a great mystery, and I don't think it's explainable. I don't think will ever be a rational, logical answer to that. It seems to be more along the line of mystery, miracle, and profound, that God can be both infinite and finite. Yet here we find ourselves as finite beings with all the troubles, difficulties, worries, adventures, and fears that come along with being finite. But all that finiteness, as my cat brings me the stick mouse trying to distract me, he goes, why don't you give up on that spiritual talk and play with me instead? Where I'm going with this is that in our finiteness comes difficulty and forgetting. And the way out is to remember. This, of course, is the great story of the 5 afflictions in yoga. The biggest affliction of all is forgetting who we are. And then it leads to the biggest problem, which is fear. And if there's one enemy of mankind throughout all of mankind's history, it's fear and its corrosive effect and its ability to produce misery. And if we're going to get ourselves out of it, we have to remember what spiritual masters have said all along. They say, hey, by the way, you guys are gods too, and you're going to do these great works. So be ye therefore perfect. So to some degree, just hearing that, just remembering that your infinite consciousness that is temporarily finite, but it doesn't have anything to do with degrading or dismissing our or your or my true nature. So I feel it's my responsibility to remind ourselves of that, to remind myself. It's been one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do is in my finiteness, in my feeling small and degraded and miserable and less than and comparing myself to others and all the sorrow and fear and blah 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 that I've incurred that I'm sure you can relate on your level. All that time was an infinite being forgetting who he was, and somehow I had a moment of clarity that said, remember, come on back up. And I'm doing my best. And I think together we can remind ourselves of our infinite nature and no longer struggle on this finite plane of existence. In the meantime, let's enjoy it, and we'll talk more about it during the week. I'll see you tomorrow.